So Discourse 4. Uddhava continued. Then, after taking their meals with the permission of those Brahmanas, so we're starting right in from after the last sentence, they drank wine, the Yadavas did, and having been deprived of their wits by tipsiness, cut one another to the quick by hurling abuses. Their intellect having been perverted due to the inebriating effect of wine, by sunset they began fighting among themselves like bamboos rubbing against one another. This is a return to a metaphor that he used earlier. Bamboos rubbing against one another in high wind can sometimes start forest fires because bamboos, particularly the kind of knotty rings around bamboos, can be very high friction, and fires start that way sometimes. Beholding the ways of his own Maya, the Lord sipped the water from the Sarasvati river and sat down at the foot of a peepal tree near its bank. When the Lord, who relieves the agony of those who resort to him for protection, made up his mind to exterminate his race, he told me, back at Dwaraka, to proceed to Badrivana, the spot where the divine sages, Nara and Narayana, themselves avatars of Vishnu, both, still practice their austere penance. Badrivana, Badrikashrama, and Badrinatha are all the different names of the same place. It refers to Badri. It's a type of small berry tree that grows there. It's a valley up in the Himalayas. It's still there. There's like a temple town there. Although, O vanquisher of foes, I was aware of his intentions, I nevertheless went after him, unable to bear separation from his feet. Looking for my beloved Lord, I beheld him, the abode of all splendor, seated all alone on the bank of the Sarasvati, although he is shelterless, being that he is the universal shelter. Possessed of a brilliant, swarthy form, which is all sattva or purity, with reddish yet most gentle eyes, he could be easily distinguished by his 4 arms, so he assumed his full 4-armed form, kind of already drawing back from the 2-armed form of the Avatarana, and the yellow silk on his person. Placing his lotus-like right foot on his left thigh, he was reclining against a young Ashvatta tree. Ashvatta is the old Sanskrit word. In modern Indian languages, they're often called peepal trees, same type of tree. And he was full of joy, even though he had renounced the pleasures of sense. Meandering through the various worlds, there came by chance at that moment the enlightened sage Maitreya, a great devotee of the Lord and a loving friend and fellow student of the sage Dvaipayana Vedavyasa. While that devoted sage stood listening with rapt attention, his head bent low in ecstasy of delight and emotion, Lord Sri Krishna, the bestower of liberation, spoke to me, refreshing me by his endearing smiles and affectionate glances. The Lord said, "Dwelling within you, I know the desire of your heart, and proceed to confer on you that which is difficult for others to attain. In your previous incarnation, when you were a Vasu, you worshipped me." He's saying this to Uddhava, not to Maitreya. Maitreya is just there listening. "You worshipped me in the sacrifice jointly performed by the Prajapatis and the Vasus, with the sole object of attaining me. The present is certainly your last incarnation, O saintly Uddhava, since you have earned my grace in this life. You are indeed fortunate in having seen me on this secluded spot by virtue of your unalloyed devotion at a time when I am about to leave this mortal world. I am going to impart to you that supreme wisdom, revealing my glory, which the sages call by the name of Bhagavata, and which I taught to Brahma the unborn, who was seated on the lotus that had sprung from my navel, in a former cycle, the Padma Kalpa, at the dawn of creation." Thus politely addressed by the Lord, and a recipient of his constant favor, I returned in faltering accents with joined palms, the hair on my body standing erect through affection and tears flowing from my eyes. "Which on earth of the 4 objects, my Lord, is difficult to attain for those who are devoted to your lotus feet?" The 4 objects being Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. "Yet, O perfect one, I crave for none of these, keen as I am to worship your lotus feet. That you should resort to action, though actionless, should be born, though devoid of birth, should take to your heels for fear of the enemy and seek shelter in a fortress, even though being the destroyer of all, and should take to wife 10,000 damsels, though delighting in your own blissful self, puzzles the mind even of the knowing. That you whose knowledge is unimpeded, uninterrupted, and ever free from doubt and error, and who are ever awake, should call me in your deliberations and consult me as an ignorant man would do, perplexes our mind, as it were, O glorious Lord. Pray instruct us, my Master, and that supreme and integral wisdom, which unfolds the mystery of your being and which you taught to Brahma, in case it is fit to be received by us, so that we may easily get over the sorrows of mundane existence. When I submitted to him in these words what was uppermost in my mind, the Supreme Lord with lotus-like eyes revealed to me his transcendent character. Having thus learnt from my worshipful Guru, Sri Krishna himself, the way of realizing God, who is the only truth, and bowing to the Lord's feet, I went round him clockwise as a mark of reverence, and came away to this place, distressed at heart due to separation from him. So he didn't actually say here what Krishna said to him, but he does later on, much later on, toward the end of the Bhagavatam, he does relate it word for word. It's sometimes separated out as the Uddhava Gita. It's a quite extensive teaching. Delighted by his sight, but now afflicted by separation from him, O Vidura, I shall proceed to the sacred spot of Badrikashrama, his favorite retreat, where the glorious Narayana and the worshipful sage Nara are engaged in peaceful yet austere penance, extending over a long period, indeed a very long period, a whole kalpa, like billions of years, for the good of the world. So Narayana in this context does not mean Bhagavan Vishnu Narayana. There is an avatar, two simultaneous avatars of Vishnu called Nara and Narayana, who are both princes and tapasvins, ascetic sages, who took a vow to do unbroken tapas for an entire kalpa at Badrikashrama, even while other avatars went on elsewhere in the world. Sri Shuka continued, the enlightened Vidura assuaged by force of wisdom the grief that had burst forth when he heard the unbearable news about the death of his near and dear ones, meaning in the Kurukshetra war, which had happened. He didn't even know about it. He learned about it afterward. He had been wandering around as a pilgrim. When that great devotee, the chief among the servants of Lord Sri Krishna, was about to depart for Badrikashrama, Vidura, the foremost among the Kauravas, spoke to him out of love. Vidura said, be pleased to impart to us the supreme wisdom which unfolds the secret of the Lord's own essential nature, and which the divine Sri Krishna, the master of yoga, taught to you. For the devotees of Lord Vishnu move about only in order to accomplish the object of their servants. Uddhava replied, for the knowledge of that truth, you should wait upon the sage Maitreya, son of Kusharu, who was personally instructed in this behalf by the Lord in my presence, while he, the Lord, was about to leave this mortal world. Sri Shuka continued, relieved of his great agony by the nectar-like talk that he had thus had with Vidura on the virtues of Lord Sri Krishna, the soul of the universe, Uddhava, the son of Upagu, passed that night as if it were a moment on the bank of the Yamuna, and departed thence early next morning. So when it said the bank of the Yamuna, what it actually translated was on the bank of the younger sister of Yamadeva, which is Yamuna. The goddess Yamuna, she's also called Yama. Yama and Yami are two siblings. Yama is the deva of dharma and of death, and his sister Yami or Yamuna is the river goddess. The king asked, meaning the king Parikshit, when even the topmost generals of the Kar warriors among the Vrishnis and Bhojas had met their end, nay, when Sri Hari himself, the supreme ruler even of the three lords of the universe, meaning Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, had to leave his body, how is it that Uddhava alone, the foremost of those generals, survived? Sri Shuka replied, when Sri Krishna, whose desire never remains unfulfilled, had exterminated his own race through the instrumentality of death, who appeared in the shape of the Brahmanas' execration, meaning their curse on the Yadavas that destroyed the Yadavas, and when he was about to cast off his body, he reflected thus, Now, when I shall have departed from this world, Udhava alone, the foremost among those who have attained self-realization, is really qualified to receive the knowledge concerning me. Udhava is in no wise inferior to me, inasmuch as he has mastered his self and is never perturbed by the objects of sense. So let him remain on earth, imparting to the world the knowledge regarding me. Instructed thus by Sri Krishna, the preceptor of the three worlds and the source of the Vedas, Udhava betook himself to Badrikashrama and adored Sri Hari through abstract meditation. When Vidura heard from Udhava an account of the praiseworthy doings of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Spirit, who had assumed a human semblance as a mere sport, as well as of the way in which he had quitted his body, which was such as strengthened the resolution of the resolute, and was something too hard to accomplish for those who have a feeble mind, and are therefore as good as beasts. And when, O Parikshit, foremost among the Kurus, he remembered that Sri Krishna had thought of him at the time of his departure, he was overwhelmed with emotion and wept on parting with that great devotee of the Lord. Leaving the bank of the Kalindi, it's another name for the Yamuna, meaning like dark water, essentially. Since in parts of the course of the Yamuna, the color of the water is strikingly dark. The enlightened Vidura, foremost of the Bharatas, reached in a few days the bank of the heavenly river Ganga, where the sage Maitreya was. Thus ends the fourth discourse in Book 3, consisting of dialogue between Vidura and Udhava of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Sanghita. Discourse 5. The sage Maitreya describes the process of creation in reply to Vidura's question. Sri Shuka continued, Vidura, the foremost of the Kurus, whose heart was purified by devotion to the imperishable Lord Sri Krishna, approached the sage Maitreya of fathomless wisdom, who was staying at Haridwara. The Haridwara is a city, it's still there in India today and still by that name. It's at the point where the Ganga has just left the foothills of the Himalayas and enters the flat plains of North India. So that's where Maitreya's ashram was at the time. And gratified by his good disposition and other virtues, asked him. Vidura said to Maitreya, people perform actions for the sake of happiness, but they neither attain happiness nor succeed in ending their sorrow thereby. On the other hand, they undergo suffering again and again as a result of those acts. Therefore, O worshipful sage, be pleased to tell me what is advisable under the circumstances. The blessed devotees of Lord Janardana move about in this world just in order to shower their grace on men who have through ill luck turned their face away from Sri Krishna and are given to unrighteousness and are therefore extremely miserable. Be pleased to point out to me, O foremost saint, that blessed path by following which people succeed in propitiating the Lord, who in turn settles in their heart, purified by devotion, and bestows on them the most ancient wisdom, which brings with it the realization of truth. Kindly also tell me what kind of deeds are performed by the Lord, who is the ruler of all the three worlds and absolutely independent, when he descends into the world of matter. How, though actionless, he brought forth this universe at the dawn of creation. How, having established it on a firm footing, he provides a means of subsistence for all created beings, and how again, having withdrawn it into the cavity of his heart and refraining from all activity, he retires into communion with his yoga maya, his divine sleep in this context, essentially. And finally, how, having entered the universe as the inner controller, the Lord of all masters of yoga, though one, appears in diverse forms. Also recounts to me the exploits that he performs as a mere sport for the well-being of the Brahmanas, the cows, and the gods in the course of his various avataras, or descents into the world of matter. My mind does not feel sated even though I go on hearing the nectar-like stories of Sri Krishna, the crest jewel of those enjoying fair renown. Pray further tell me, O chief of the Brahmanas, with what principles that suzerain lord of all the worlds created the different worlds and their guardian deities, as well as the dark regions, meaning the dark regions lying beyond the mountain Loka Parvata. that gets into cosmology. Um, it'll be explained, and I can explain more if later on what that refers to. The dark regions wherein appear all classes of beings entrusted with different duties, and how the self-existent Lord Narayana, the maker of the universe, endowed all created beings with a distinctive disposition, activity, form, and name. I have often heard, O worshipful sage, from the lips of the sage Vyasa about the duties of the higher as well as the lower classes of men, meaning the Dvijas and the Shudras. But I am now fed up with all other dharmas, conducive as they are to trivial joys, and find my sole delight in the stream of nectar that flows from the stories of Sri Krishna. As a matter of fact, who can be sated with the stories of Sri Krishna, whose feet are the abode of all sanctity, which are sung with praise by seers like Narada in the assemblies of holy men like you? For entering the cavity of a man's ears, the Lord cuts asunder the bond of attachment to his home, which throws one into the whirlpool of metempsychosis. It was with the intention of recounting the Lord's virtues that your friend, the sage Krishna Dvaipayana Veda Vyasa, composed the Mahabharata. For even there, while dwelling on the pleasures of sense, the mind of human beings is ultimately drawn towards the stories of Sri Hari. The attraction for the stories of Sri Hari, when it grows, creates aversion in the mind of a devout man for other things. Nay, it speedily puts an end to all the sorrows of the man who has tasted the joy flowing from the constant remembrance of Sri Hari's feet. I deplore those ignorant men who have a dislike for the stories of Sri Hari due to their sins, and therefore deserve to be pitied even by the pitiable. The deity presiding over time cuts short their allotted span of life, engaged as they are in idle talk, idle activities, and idle thought. Therefore, O Maitreya, son of Kusharu, friend of the afflicted, even as a bee gathers honey from the flowers, so be pleased to extract the essence of all stories in the shape of the stories of Sri Hari, the bestower of blessedness and the abode of sacred renown, and relate the same to me for my good. Also kindly recount to me the superhuman feats performed by the Lord when he descended into the world of matter, assuming his energy, his Maya Shakti, for the sake of creation, preservation, and dissolution of the universe. Sri Shuka continued, questioned thus by Vidura for the supreme good of men, the worshipful sage Maitreya, son of Kusharu, addressed him as follows, showing great honor to him. Maitreya said, O pious Vidura, you have put mankind under a deep obligation by asking me this excellent question. Your mind is already fixed on the Lord, who is beyond sense perception, and your fame will thus be spread far and wide in this world. Vidura, it is not to be wondered at that you should have thus captivated Sri Hari, the Lord of the universe, by your exclusive devotion, begotten as you are by no less a personage than the sage Badarayana Vedavyasa, who is indeed Vidura's physical father. You are no other than the worshipful Yama, the punisher of all creatures, descended as a result of the imprecation pronounced by the sage Mandavya from the loins of the sage Vyasa, son of Satyavati, through the maidservant and concubine of the latter's deceased uterine brother Vichitravirya, who was also born of Satyavati. So that's referring to a complicated family history referenced in the Mahabharata. But the particularly important point is that Vidura is an avatar of Yamadeva. Moreover, you are ever beloved of the Lord as well as of his devotees. That is why, while departing from this world, the Lord commanded me to teach you wisdom. I therefore now proceed to recount in due order the Lord's pastimes, or his leelas, unfolded by his Yoga Maya for the creation, preservation, and destruction of the universe. Before creation, this universe existed in no other form than the Lord, who is the very self and the ruler of all the jivas. The spirit did not appear then in the form of many a subject and object, for it was his will that he should remain alone. He cast his eyes all round, but failed to perceive any object, for he shone all alone at that time. He felt as though he were non-existent, for all his powers lay dormant, although his consciousness was wide awake. It is this energy of the all-perceiving Lord, in the form of search for an object, that is called Maya, which is of the nature of both cause and effect. It was with the help of this Maya, O blessed Vidura, that the Almighty Lord created this universe. When the equilibrium of the three gunas constituting this Maya was disturbed by force of time, the transcendent Lord, who is spiritual in essence, placed therein as Purusha, who is his own fragment. His seed, his seed in the form of Chidabhasa, the primal seed of the jiva. From this unmanifest Maya or Prakriti, impelled by time, was evolved the Mahatattva, which, as the dispeller of darkness, or the dispeller of ignorance, is of the nature of understanding, and is capable of manifesting the universe existing in itself in a subtle form. Subject to the Chidabhasa, or the jiva, the three gunas constituting Maya and time, this Mahat, when it fell within the range of the Lord's vision, transformed itself with the intention of creating this universe. From the Mahat Tattva, as it underwent transformation, was evolved the principle of Aham, the ego, which, being of the nature of Adhibhuta, Adhyatma, and Adhidaiva, is the cause of the five gross elements, the Indriyas, the five senses of perception, and the mind. Ahankara, the ego, is of three kinds: Vaikarika, which means Sattvika, Taijasa, which is Rajasika, and Tamasika. From the Sattvika ego, as it underwent transformation, sprang up the mind, as well as the deities presiding over the senses, who are all of a Sattvika type, revealing as they do the objects of the senses. The senses of perception, as well as the organs of action, are evolutes of the Rajasika ego alone, whereas from the Tamasika ego was evolved the source of the other subtle elements, the original source being sound. And this latter, again, is the sound, is the cause of ether, which serves as an illustration of the spirit, by virtue of its all-pervasiveness. When ether came within the range of the Lord's vision along with time, Maya, and the jiva, these combined to produce the sensation of touch, and this latter, as it underwent transformation, evolved the air. The most powerful air, even as it underwent transformation, combined with ether to produce the sensation of color, and from color was evolved fire, the illuminator of the world. Fire, when it came within the range of the Lord's vision and underwent transformation, combined with air as well as with time, Maya, and the jiva to produce water, which is an evolute of taste. Water, when it came within the sight of the all-perceiving Brahman and underwent transformation, combined with fire as well as with time, Maya, and the jiva to evolve the earth, which has odor for its special characteristic. Of the elements beginning with ether, air, fire, water, and earth, O blessed Vidura, the later in evolution the elements, the larger number of qualities it should be understood to possess. For every effect naturally inherits the characteristics of its cause, along with its own characteristics. The deities presiding over the Mahatattva and other categories, sharing as they do the characteristics of time, Maya, and the jiva, the essential characteristic of time being transformation, the essential characteristic of Maya being distraction, and the essential characteristic of the jiva being consciousness. These deities who preside over these are rays of Lord Vishnu himself. But when they were unable to do their work of creating the universe, because of their heterogeneity and lack of coordination, they prayed to the Almighty Lord with joined palms. The gods said, "We bow, O Lord, to your lotus feet that relieve the agony of the suppliant, even as an umbrella affords relief from the heat of the sun, and by resorting to whose souls striving men easily drive away the endless woes of earthly existence. Because living beings in this world, O Creator and Lord of the universe, never enjoy peace of mind, stricken as they are by the threefold agony, therefore, O Lord, do we resort to the shade of your feet, which is the abode of wisdom. We have taken shelter in your feet, which are the abode of sanctity, which the seers search for in seclusion with the help of Vedic mantras that are like birds having their nest in the lotus of your mouth, and which are the source of the Ganga, the foremost of all the rivers whose water possesses the virtue of wiping out one's sins. We resort to the footstool bearing your lotus feet, by contemplating on which, in their heart, that is being purified through reverence and devotion in the shape of hearing and chanting the divine names and glory, etc. Your votaries succeed in controlling their mind with the help of wisdom strengthened by dispassion. Lord, you have descended into the world of matter for creating, preserving, and destroying the universe. We all take refuge in your lotus feet, which, when meditated upon, vouchsafe fearlessness to their worshippers. We resort, O Lord, to your lotus feet, which are far removed from such men as have deep-rooted, though false, identification with their frail body and habitation, as well as with persons and things connected with them, looking upon them either as their very own self or their own, even though you dwell in their own body as the inner controller. They whose inner mind is led astray by their senses, that are ever moving among the unworthy objects of the world, O suzerain Lord of wide renown, are therefore surely unable to see those devotees who enjoy the privilege of beholding the elegance of your graceful footsteps. They, on the other hand, O Lord, whose heart has been purified through devotion intensified by drinking the nectar of your stories, duly attain that spiritual insight whose essence lies in dispassion, and easily ascend to your eternal abode Vaikuntha. Even so, other wise men, who have conquered your most powerful prakriti by force of yoga consisting in concentration of mind on the self, undoubtedly enter you, the Supreme Spirit, though their hardship is great, whereas there is no hardship in adoring you. O primal Lord, we who are ever yours have been created by you one after another with the help of the three gunas that constitute our very nature, with the intention of evolving the universe. Yet we are all disjoined. That is why we are unable to present to you the universe, which will serve as a means of carrying on your future pastimes. Therefore, O unborn Lord, devise some means whereby we may be enabled to create the universe and offer our tribute to you in its entirety at the allotted time, and whereby we may also derive our sustenance, and all the beings may get their food without any let or hindrance, offering their tribute to you as well as to us. You, the immutable ancient person alone, are the prime cause of us gods as well as of the other evolutes. It was you again, O unborn Lord, who placed the seed in the form of the conscious jiva in the womb of your Maya Shakti, who is the source of the three gunas as well as of all activity. O Supreme Spirit, what shall we, the deities presiding over the Mahatattva and others, do for you, since that is the purpose for which we are born? O Lord, we depend on your grace alone. Therefore, for success in the work of creation, pray confer on us your divine vision, along with your creative energy. Thus ends the fifth discourse in Book 3 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Sanghita. Discourse 6, Appearance of the Cosmic Body. So this is the third time in the Bhagavatam that we're getting an overview of the process of creation and the description of the cosmic body, expressed slightly differently each time because it's being expressed by different people each time. So this is Maitreya's understanding of it. The sage Maitreya said, when the Almighty Lord saw that his own powers, the Mahatattva and the rest, were unable to start the work of creating the universe because there was no harmony among them, he assumed his divine potency known by the name of Kala, time, and simultaneously entered the 23 categories: the Mahatattva, the ego, the 5 senses of perception, the 5 organs of action, and the mind, the 5 subtle elements, and the 5 gross elements. Having entered these categories that stood disconnected, he united them by his active power, stimulating their dormant energy. When they were thus roused into activity, the 23 categories, impelled as they were by God, evolved the cosmic body out of their own parts. In other words, even as the Supreme entered them, that group of 23 categories, which had taken upon themselves the work of creating the universe, partially underwent transformation as a result of mutual cooperation. It is this transformation of the 23 categories which goes by the name of the cosmic body, the abode of the whole animate and inanimate creation. That all effulgent cosmic being dwelt with the jivas, which lay in an unmanifest state, for 1,000 celestial years, which would be 360,000 Earth years, or the time equivalent to that, in the space having the shape of the interior of an egg, with water surrounding it on all sides. That cosmic body, the evolute of the categories entrusted with the work of creating the universe, endowed as it was with knowledge, activity, and the power of enjoyment, manifested itself of its own accord as one, as 10, and as 3. Here the one refers to the heart, not the physical organ, but the cosmic principle of the heart, or the inner organ. As 10, the 10 vital airs, the 10 modes of prana, and as 3, the adhyatmika, adhidaivika, and adhibhautika aspects. As the totality of all the jivas, he is the soul of all living beings. He is a part as an embodied spirit, he is a part manifestation of the Supreme Spirit. And as the first manifestation of reality, he is the prime avatara, since reality itself, or the universe itself, is an avatara of the unmanifest Lord. The entire living creation takes its shape in him. As possessed of adhyatma, adhidaiva, and adhibhuta, the cosmic being is of 3 kinds. As the prana, he is of 10 kinds. And as the heart, he is only 1. And there, the translator adds a footnote here, which I do think is worth going through. I'm explaining these principles, adhyatma, adhidaiva, and adhibhuta, and the 10 pranas. Adhyatma denotes the 10 indriyas, the 5 senses of perception and the five organs of action, and the mind. So all of those are under the category adhyatma, the category that pertains to the self, or the atma. Adhidaiva means the category of devas, the deities who preside over the indriyas and the mind. And the objects of the senses constitute what is known as adhibhuta. The 10 pranas are called prana, apana, dhyana, udana, samana, naga, kurma, krikala, devadatta, and dhananjaya. The air which we inhale and exhale, either through the nostrils or through the mouth, and which has its seat in the lungs, is called prana. That which has a downward course and has its seat in the anus, the expelling wind of the body, is known as apana. That which has its seat in the navel and is essential to digestion, the fiery breath of digestion, bears the name of samana. That which has an upward course and has its seat in the throat is known by the name of udana. That which circulates in every direction and is diffused through the body is called vyana, the wind of circulation, the circulatory system that nourishes the body. That which enables us to belch is known as, so those first 5 are often there's a reference to the 5 prana vayus, like in Ayurveda, because those first 5 are by far the most important, but there are actually 5 more subtler subcategories. That which enables us to belch is known as naga. That which helps us to open our eyes bears the name of kurma. That which excites our hunger is known by the name of krikala. That which enables us to yawn is called devadatta. And that which nourishes the body is known as dhananjaya. So Maitreya continues. Recalling the prayer of the deities presiding over the Mahattattva and other categories, the Lord, who is beyond sense perception, illumined the cosmic being with his own effulgence in order to awaken their potentialities. Now hear from me as I tell you how many abodes for the deities appeared in the cosmic being, illumined as he now was. There appeared in him a mouth, the god of fire, one of the protectors of the world, whose abode it is, whose abode the mouth is, entered it along with his power, the organ of speech, by means of which the jiva utters words. Then appeared in Srihari a palate, the abode of Varuna, the god presiding over the waters and another protector of the world. Protector of the world is translating Lokapala. It's a category of deity. Who entered it along with his power, the sense of taste, by means of which the jiva perceives taste. Next appeared in the cosmic being a pair of nostrils, the abode of the twin gods, the Ashvins, who entered them along with their power, the olfactory sense, the means of perceiving odor. Now appeared in the cosmic being a pair of eyes. Tvashta, another protector of the world, entered them, along with his power, the sense of sight, the means of perceiving colors. Tvashta, not to be confused with Tvashtra, a very similar name, but that's a different deity. Tvashta is a name of Surya Deva, the sun god. Tvashtra is a totally different deva. Again appeared on his body the skin, the seat of the tactile sense. The wind god, Vayudeva, another protector of the world, entered it along with his power, the tactile sense, by means of which the jiva experiences touch. Further appeared in his body a pair of ears, the personal abode of Digdevatas, the deities presiding over the cardinal points, who entered them along with their power, the auditory sense, by means of which the jiva perceives sound. Then appeared on his body the skin. There's a footnote here explaining why skin has been enumerated twice, because it is the seat of two distinct senses, the sense of touch and the itching sensation, or to put another way, the sense of external touch and the sense of internal touch. The skin perceives things it externally touches, but it also perceives things of which an itch is one of the most strong examples that arise internally rather than because it came into contact with an external object. In the former case, the presiding deity of the sense of touching an external thing, the presiding deity is Vayu. But the presiding deity of the sense of perceiving a sensation that arose internally is not Vayu, but is the deities of annual plants. So there's annual and perennial plants. The devas of annual plants are also the devas of the perception of sensations that arise internally. So then there appeared on his body the skin, the abode of the deities presiding over the annual plants, who entered it along with their power in the shape of the hair, by means of which the jiva feels the itching sensation. So they're also the presiding devas of the body hair. Next appeared on his body a penis, the abode of Prajapati himself, who entered it along with his power, the capacity to procreate, by means of which the jiva experiences the joy of copulation or sexual pleasure. Now appeared in the cosmic being an anus. The god Mitra, a protector of the world, entered it along with his power, the organ of defecation, by means of which the jiva evacuates his bowels. Again appeared on his body a pair of arms and hands. The god Indra, the lord of paradise, entered them along with his power, the capacity to hold and let go an object, by means of which the jiva makes his living. Further appeared on his person a pair of legs and feet. Lord Vishnu, the protector of the world, entered them along with his power, the faculty of locomotion, by means of which the jiva reaches the place he intends to visit. So here we see that Maitreya is a little bit more pragmatic, so to speak, in how he expresses things than the last time we were given this whole overview. The purpose of arms and hands was said to be the performance of yajna, and the purpose of legs and feet was said to be so that the jiva may gather the articles of yajna. Here Maitreya puts it a little more broadly, lets you reach the place you intend to visit, lets you make your living, etc. Subsequently appeared in him the intellect, the abode of Brahma, the lord or husband of Sarasvati, the goddess presiding over speech, who entered it along with his power the faculty of understanding, the means of apprehending that which is to be known. Thereafter appeared in him a heart, the abode of the moon god, or Soma, who entered it along with his power the mind, by means of which the jiva indulges in thoughts of various kinds. Subsequent to this appeared in him the ego, the abode of the god Rudra, who entered it along with his power the feeling of egotism, by means of which the jiva entertains the sense of duty. Then appeared in him a chitta, the seat of intellection, the abode of Brahma, who entered it along with his power the faculty of intellection, by means of which the jiva distinguishes between right and wrong, etc. In other words, thinks analytically about what their mind, the contents of their mind. From his head emanated the heavenly world, the earth from his feet, and the sky from his navel. So this refers to Bhu, Bhuva, and Svargalokas, the three worlds. Svara or Svarga emanated from his head. Bhuvar, the intermediate atmosphere or sky world, and Bhu or Bhur, the earth. In these regions are found the gods and other beings, such as humans and ghosts and spirits, etc. The evolutes of sattva, such as the gods, the evolutes primarily of rajas, such as humans, and the evolutes of tamas, like ghosts and dark spirits, respectively. Out of these, the gods, through the predominance of sattva, found their abode in heaven. Human beings and other creatures that are useful to the latter obtained their residence on earth because of their rajasika temperament, while the hosts of Rudra's attendants, spirits, ghosts, etc., the bhutaganas and pramatas and romyas, these different kinds of spirits that follow Rudra, took up their residence in the sky between heaven and earth, which represents the navel of the cosmic being. From the mouth of the cosmic being emanated the Vedas, O Vidura, as well as the Brahmana who came to be the foremost of all the Varnas, as well as their teacher, only because he sprang from the mouth of the cosmic being. From the arms, so this is a expression of the, this is basically a summary of the Purusha Sukta of the Rig Veda here.
Hey, sorry. What time you started, Jacob?
Hi, we started at 9.
Just now?
No. We started almost an hour ago.
Oh my goodness. Is the time put back already?
Oh, maybe it was.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so sorry. Go ahead. I will.
Sure. No problem. Yeah. The whole thing's recorded, so I'll post it.
Okay.
I didn't even notice. My clock changes automatically.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So Maitreya is kind of summarizing part of the Purusha Sukta from the Rig Veda here, that about the origin of the 4 Varnas. From the mouth of the cosmic being emanated the Vedas, O Vidura, as well as the Brahmana, who came to be the foremost of all the Varnas, as well as their teacher, only because he sprang from the mouth of the cosmic being. From the arms emanated the vocation of a Kshatriya, which is the protection and governance of the people, as well as the Kshatriya himself, who is devoted to that profession and who, being a ray of Lord Vishnu, the protector, is born to protect the other Varnas against the ravages of thieves and robbers. From the thighs of that almighty Lord proceeded agriculture and other occupations of a Vaishya, who provides sustenance to the whole world, subsistence to the whole world, as also the Vaishya himself, who procures a living for all mankind. From the Lord's feet was evolved the calling of service, which is essential for the discharge of all sacred duties. And for carrying on this pursuit was produced of yore the Shudra, whose very occupation secures the pleasure of the Lord. And there's a footnote here. Service is the root of the successful performance of all sacred duties. No sacred obligation can be discharged without service. Hence, the place of the Shudra, whose allotted duty is service, the root of all virtues, is indeed high among all the Varnas. The dharma of a Brahmana has moksha for its goal. That of a Kshatriya has kama, or enjoyment, for its objective. That of a Vaishya has wealth, or artha, for its goal, while that of a Shudra has dharma for its object. So Maitreya goes on, for the purification of their heart, all these four classes reverently adore by means of their respective duties their own father Sri Hari, from whom they all sprang up, along with their several occupations. Who can dare describe in full, O Vidura, the cosmic body of the Lord, who has time, karma, and svabhava of the jivas for his potencies? Svabhava means like innate disposition. Everything has its own svabhava, or its innate disposition. The body which reveals the might of the Lord's yoga maya. Yet, in order to purify my own speech, which has been rendered foul by other talk, I proceed to sing, dear Vidura, the glory of Sri Hari according to my own lights and on the basis of what I have heard from my Guru. The wise declare that the sole utility of men's speech decidedly lies in uttering the praises of the Lord, who is the foremost of those enjoying the highest renown, and that the sole utility of one's ears lies in their coming into touch with the nectar-like discourses on Sri Hari, delivered by learned men. Was it possible, dear child, for Brahma to fathom the glory of Sri Hari even after pondering it for 1,000 celestial years with his intellect ripened through the practice of yoga? It's a rhetorical question. The answer is no, he was not fully. Therefore, the Lord's Maya deludes even those skilled in creating illusions. When the Lord himself does not know the course of his own Maya, how can others fathom it? Obeisance to the Lord, from whom not only speech and mind, but even Rudra and other gods return disappointed, unable to reach him. Thus ends the 6th discourse in Book 3 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Sanghita. Discourse 7, Vidura's questions. Sri Shuka continued, when Maitreya spoke thus, the enlightened Vidura, son of Dvaipayana Veda Vyasa, further asked him as follows, delighting him by his speech, as it were. Vidura asked, O holy sage, how can the Lord, who is pure consciousness, immutable and unqualified, come to be associated with attributes and activity, even in sport? It is the hankering and the desire to play with another that impels a child to betake itself to play with another child or with another object other than itself. But how can the Lord, who is satisfied in himself and is ever one without a second, take to play? It was through his own Maya, consisting of the 3 gunas, that the Lord created the universe. Nay, it is through the same Maya that he sustains it and shall finally withdraw it. How can he whose knowledge, which is his very nature, is never obscured by space, time, or circumstance, either by itself or through any other external cause, be associated with Maya? It is the Lord alone who is present in all bodies. How can there be any ill luck for him? And how can he suffer any agony due to karmas? My mind, O sage, is much distracted, stuck as it is in this morass of ignorance. Remove, my lord, this great confusion of my mind. Sri Shuka went on. Interrupted thus by Vidura, who was keen to know the truth, the sage, who is free from all conceit, replied as though smiling, his mind fixed on the Lord. Maitreya said, that this spirit, who is the ruler and ever free, should feel miserable and fall into bondage, is against all logic. Yet such is the Lord's Maya. It is because of this Maya that the jiva appears to be bound, etc., even though such bondage does not exist in reality, just as a man sees himself beheaded in a dream, even though in reality his head has not been severed. Again, just as trembling and other characteristics which are attributable to water alone are seen in the moon in water, in other words, how if the moon is reflected in water, then if there are ripples in the water, you will see ripples in the moon, even though the actual moon is not rippling. Though really non-existent therein, in the moon itself. So the attributes of the body appear in the soul that has identified itself with a body, meaning that the experience of suffering, for instance, is the experience of suffering is unreal in the sense, in the same way that the ripples in the reflection of the moon are unreal in the actual moon. Oh, I see that Radha put this in the chat. I haven't shared a link to the most recent one on Facebook, but this is in Book 3, Discourse 7 is where we are right now. That false identification with the experience of the body gradually disappears through the practice of devotion to the Lord, which is possible only by the grace of Lord Vasudeva, which in its turn is secured by discharging one's duties in a disinterested spirit in this world. A disinterested spirit meaning, this is the essence of karma yoga as explained in the Gita, meaning without attachment to the fruits, to perform one's dharma without attachment to the results of your actions, just doing your best whether or not you're successful. When the senses have withdrawn from their objects and get exclusively devoted to Sri Hari, the Supreme Spirit and Seer, all the distractions of the soul vanish, as in the case of a man buried in deep sleep. All one's afflictions are got rid of by uttering and hearing the praises of Sri Krishna, the slayer of the demon Mura. What wonder then that such a result should be brought about by fondness developed in one's heart for worshipping the dust of his lotus feet. Vidura said, "My doubts have been eradicated by the sword of your reasoned exposition, my lord. My mind has now clearly grasped both the points, the Lord's freedom and the Jiva's dependence. You have rightly observed, O sage, that the bondage, etc., of the Jiva is attributable to Sri Hari's own Maya. Such bondage is only apparent, without any reality or foundation, for the universe itself has no foundation except the Lord's Maya. He who is the most ignorant, and he who has realized God, who is beyond the reach of mind, both these lead a carefree life in this world, while he who stands between the two lives in misery. Having concluded that the material world, though appearing to exist, is not real, I shall now, by the service of your feet, get rid even of that false appearance. Through the service of these feet can be had the feast of intense devotion to the feet of the immutable Lord, the slayer of the demon Madhusudana, devotion that puts an end to the agony of birth and death. The service of the Lord's devotees, who are living approaches to Lord Vishnu, or to his divine realm, and in whose company are ever sung the praises of Lord Janardana, who is adored even by gods, cannot be easily secured by men of little penance." I see someone else is just joining. Radha also joined late. I didn't even realize, but apparently there was a time change today, so we started an hour ago. But I'll keep going a little bit. So yeah, we are in, if you're just joining, we are in Book 3, Discourse 7. Or a ways into Book 3, Discourse 7. So Vidura is going on to the sage Maitreya. At the dawn of creation, the Almighty Lord brought forth in their order of sequence the Mahattattva and other categories, along with their evolutes, and having evolved the cosmic body out of those categories, eventually entered the same. It is that cosmic being whom the Vedas call the most ancient person, who is endowed with thousands of feet, thighs, and arms, and in whom all these different worlds abide with ample space about them. Nay, it is in that cosmic being, as you declare, that the 10 vital airs, each of which again manifests itself in 3 forms, abide along with the Indriyas and their objects, as well as the deities presiding over them. And from the same being have emanated the 4 classes of society. Pray speak to me now about the glorious manifestations of that cosmic being, from whom were evolved, along with their sons and grandsons, great-grandsons, and kinsmen, living beings of various forms and shapes who filled this universe. Who are the Prajapatis that were evolved by Brahma? Again, what are the main categories of beings that he created, and what are their subdivisions? And in what order did he evolve the 14 Manus that preside over 1 full Manvantara each? Pray also let me know their lines of descent, and narrate the doings of their descendants, and further describe, O son of Mitra, Maitreya, the relative position and dimensions of the spheres that are located above and below the Earth, as well as of the terrestrial region, and the detailed process of creation of beasts, human beings, and gods, reptiles, and birds, in short, of all living beings, viviparous and oviparous, those born of sweat and those sprouting from the soil. Also, kindly recount at length the glorious exploits connected with the creation, preservation, and dissolution of the universe, of the Lord who is the abode of Sri, and who bodied himself forth as Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, his manifestations with reference to a particular guna. O Lord, further tell me the grouping of society into so many varnas and ashramas on the basis of outward marks, conduct, and temperament, the birth and doings, etc., of the rishis, and the divisions of the Vedas, the extensive details of sacrifices, the path of yoga, the path of renunciation, and the path of knowledge or discrimination between matter and spirit, the Vaishnava cult, or the Pancharatra Agama, taught by the Lord to the sage Narada, the heterogeneity caused by the dissemination of heretic doctrines, the descent of races through a mother belonging to a higher caste than the father, and the nature and variety of destinies reached by men after their death according to their gunas and karma. Also tell me, O holy Brahmana, the means conducive severally to religious merit, worldly riches, sensuous enjoyment, and final beatitude, without prejudice to one another, the methods one by one of agriculture, trade, etc., as well as of administration of justice and study of the Vedas, the method of performing sraddha, which is a ceremony in honor and for the benefit of dead relatives, and even so the evolution of the pitris, the ancestors. This translation tends to translate pitris as manes. It's a very obscure word, manes, but it does mean the souls of the ancestors. And likewise, the relative position of the planets, lunar mansions, meaning the nakshatras, and other stars among the heavenly bodies as determining the divisions of time. What is the reward of charitable gifts, austere penance, sacrificial acts, and works of public utility, such as the digging of wells and tanks, the construction of roads and temples, the cultivation of public gardens, etc.? What are the duties of one living abroad, as well as of a man in adverse circumstances? Also tell me, O sinless Maitreya, the means by which Lord Sri Krishna, who is invoked by his devotees, the source of piety, can be propitiated, and what type of men are able to win his pleasure. Teachers who are kind to the meek, O chief of the Brahmanas, tell their devoted pupils and sons even what they may not have asked. So he's basically saying, I'm trying to ask you everything, but if I forgot a question, answer it anyway. In how many ways, O worshipful sage, do these elements, earth, etc., return to their source? And who wait on him even during a pralaya? And who get merged in him while he is in yoga nidra? Meaning, during a pralaya means while the universe is unmanifest. Who then, if anyone, is waiting upon the Lord? What is the true nature of the jiva and the essential character of the Supreme? What is the wisdom taught by the Upanishads? And what, again, is the use a teacher has for his pupil, and vice versa? Then, what are the means suggested by the wise, O sinless one, for attaining that wisdom? For neither spiritual enlightenment, nor devotion, nor dispassion can be had by itself. In other words, you can't just have it because you want to have it. What are the means of obtaining it? Therefore, being friendly disposed towards me, kindly answer these questions of mine that I have asked with intent to acquaint myself with the exploits of Sri Hari, ignorant as I am and blinded by Maya. All the Vedas, sacrificial acts, and austere penance and charitable gifts, O Holy One, cannot equal even a fraction of the merits that one acquires by rendering a jiva immune from the fear of birth and death. So in other words, he's praising Maitreya as a guru for rendering him immune from fear and birth and death by granting him knowledge. Sri Shuka continued, when Vidura asked Maitreya questions bearing on the theme of the Puranas, the latter was immensely delighted on being urged to narrate the stories of the Lord, and smilingly spoke as follows. Thus ends the 7th discourse in Book 3 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Sanghita. So I feel like what I can do, since a couple people missed the time change. I actually missed it too, but my clocks just I'll go by clocks that change automatically. So I started at 9. I can keep going for a while. If people who joined earlier need to go, we'll have it all recorded, and that way people who just joined get a little bit more. So I will continue a little bit longer with Discourse 8 on Brahma's manifestation. So I mentioned earlier, this is the third time in the Bhagavatam that we've kind of gone through the process of creation as expressed by different people. This is Maitreya teaching it to Vidura. And they do express it slightly differently each time with different insights. Where I started today, we were in book 3 already. We started book 3, Discourse 4. We're now at we started 3.4. We're now at 3.8. Maitreya said, "Oh, the race of Puru has become worthy of adoration even by noble men ever since you were born into it. You who are no other than the god Yama, one of the protectors of the world." Since Vidura is indeed an avatar of Yamadeva. "So devoted to the Lord, and you lend fresher and newer charm at every step and every moment to the garland of Sri Hari's glories. Now, in order to relieve the great woe of men who fall into it in their search for trivial delights, I commence the Bhagavata Purana, which Lord Sankarshana himself, Lord Sankarshana meaning Sheshanaga, was pleased to teach the seers. Eager to know the truth about the Lord, who is even higher than Sankarshana, Sanat Kumara and the other sages, meaning the other sages, his 3 brothers, Sanat Kumara and his 3 brothers, approached and questioned Lord Sankarshana, the first among the gods, whose wisdom knows no obstruction and who had ensconced himself in the subterranean region of Patala. Sankarshana was engaged in offering worship to his own stay, his own source and mainstay, whom the Vedas call by the Lord in the name of Lord Vasudeva. And in order to afford delight to the sages, he had now partially opened his eyes from his deep meditation that resembled a pair of lotus buds at which he had turned inward till then. The sages touched with their matted locks, drenched by the water of the heavenly river, the lotus that served as a support for his feet, and which daughters of the serpent chiefs lovingly worshipped through various offerings with a longing to obtain a suitable match. So this is explained here that while coming from the highest heaven Satyaloka to the nethermost region of Patala, it seems Sanat Kumara and others had coursed through the stream of the Ganga, which flows from Satyaloka right down to Patala, washing on its way all the celestial spheres. This accounts for that their hair was wet. They had recently passed through water to reach Sankarshana down at the bottom of the underworld. And it's saying that the Naginis of Patala would worship the lotus of Sankarshana, hoping to get good husbands. The sages, who were conversant with his doings, repeatedly extolled them in accents that faltered on account of affection. The 1,000 noble hoods of the serpent god were brightened by superb gems set in his 1,000 crowns. Tradition says that the most worshipful Sankarshana taught this Bhagavata to Sanat Kumara, who was devoted to the path of renunciation. And the latter, in his turn, Sanat Kumara, O dear Vidura, imparted it to Sankhyayana, who had taken a vow of strict celibacy, and asked him questions about the same. Sankhyayana, the foremost among those who had realized the truth, in his eagerness to recount the glories of the Lord, repeated it to his devoted pupil and our preceptor, Parashara. Maitreya saying our preceptor, even though perhaps some of his fellow devotees were also there at his ashram. Hence he would say our preceptor, Parashara. And then to the sage Brahaspati. Urged by Pulastya, Pulastya is one of the Prajapatis. He's a Manasaputra, mind-born son of Brahma. The gracious sage Parashara reproduced that foremost Purana to me, and I now proceed to teach the same to you, dear child, who are so reverent and ever devoted to me. The whole of this universe was submerged in water. At that time, the only one that existed was Lord Narayana, who lay on his couch of Shesha, having shut his eyes on account of sleep, although his consciousness was wide awake even then, ceasing from all activity and reveling in the bliss of his own self. Having deposited the subtle bodies of all the jivas in his own body, the Lord reposed on those waters which served as his resting place, even as fire remains latent in wood, concealing its burning capacity, etc., keeping only his potency in the shape of time active. Having thus slept, so time was still passing, but no other process of creation was going on. Having thus slept on those waters for a period equivalent to 1,000 rounds of the 4 yugas, with his own energy in the form of consciousness about him, when he was shown the residue of karma of all the jivas by his potency called time, which had already been directed by him for this purpose, he saw countless worlds merged in his own body. So that was a very subtle thing that it just said there. But what it's saying is that he had instructed time itself, to, after a certain amount of time, show him the residual karma in the jivas. So at the end of the previous creation, jivas were in the middle of activity. They had karma that hadn't been resolved, and it was all just put on pause as the universe was destroyed and absorbed into the Lord. And he basically went to sleep, but kind of set himself an alarm clock, so to speak. He told time itself to, at a certain point, show him the frozen snapshot of all the residual karma in the jivas that he had absorbed, because it's all going to be set back into motion just as it was when he starts the universe up again. When his eye thus fell on the subtle matter which lay deposited in his body, and which was now roused into activity by the Rajoguna, the principle of activity impelled by time, the same, all of those worlds and all of that paused karma, issued out of his navel in order to evolve grosser forms. By force of time, which roused into activity the residue of karma of the jivas, that subtle matter which came out of the navel of Lord Vishnu sprang all of a sudden in the form of a lotus bud, illuminating with its splendor that vast expanse of water even as the sun. The all-pervading Lord Vishnu himself, O Vidura, entered as the inner controller, that lotus representing all the worlds, which brought to light all the objects of sensuous enjoyment. When the Lord entered the lotus, there appeared from it the creator, Brahma, who is no other than Veda personified, and whom they call Swayambhu, or self-born. Perched on the pericarp of the lotus, Brahma failed to perceive any world. Turning his neck all round, therefore, he looked about in the sky with distended eyes, meaning that he strove to see very far in all directions, and was immediately endowed with 4 faces, one on each side, because his impulse was to look keenly in every direction at once, in all the 4 directions. Lo, resting on that lotus, which had emerged from the waters uproarious with waves tossed by the winds which characterized the period of universal destruction, Brahma could not make out the reality of that lotus, which formed the basis of the coming worlds, nor the reality of himself. Who am I, he thought, seated on the pericarp of this lotus, and whence can this lotus be, standing on these waters all alone? It can therefore be easily understood by any sane person that there must be something underneath it, on which this stands supported. Reasoning thus, he dived into the water through the pores in the stalk of that lotus. So in other words, he didn't dive off the lotus into the water. He made his body subtle and descended through the lotus down into its stalk. But much as he strove to find out the base of the lotus stalk, the unborn Brahma failed to get at it then, even though he approached it. While he thus looked about for his own source in that impenetrable darkness, O Vidura, there elapsed a very long time. Time, which is nothing but the Lord's discus, the Sudarshana chakra, the wheel of time, that inspires terror in the heart of living creatures and cuts short the allotted span of their life. At last, Brahma gave up the search without achieving the object of his desire, and returning to his resting place, the deity gradually controlled his breath, withdrew his mind from everything else, and sat down in samadhi. When he had unremittingly practiced yoga for 100 years, the light of wisdom dawned on him, and he saw revealed in his heart of its own accord that which he had failed to perceive before. I also think that that's not 100 of our years, but 100 of his years, which is a much, much longer span. On the waters that had submerged the whole universe during the period of universal destruction, Brahma beheld the one supreme person, Lord Narayana, lying on the huge body of Shesha, which was white as a lotus fiber and served as a bed for him. The hoods of the serpent god, numbering 10,000, served as so many umbrellas for the Lord, and the gems set on his crowns, on the serpent's crowns, dispelled by their brilliance the darkness all around. By the effulgence of his swarthy person, he obscured the splendor of a mountain of emerald, meaning the Lord lying on the serpent bed. Obscured, meaning like outshone, outdid the splendor of a mountain of emerald. He outshone the bright evening clouds hanging round the sides of such a mountain by his yellow loincloth. By the brilliant crown adorning his head, he stole the charm of its many peaks of gold. By his wreath of sylvan flowers, he eclipsed the beauty of the gems, rills, shining herbs, and flowers adorning the breast of such a mountain. By his shapely arms, he excelled the bamboos, looking like the arms of that mountain. And by his beautiful legs, he threw into the background the trees constituting its legs. His person, which contained all the three worlds, was its own compeer, both in length and breadth, meaning that nothing else but itself could be compared to it. Even though it added grace to its wonderful divine ornaments and robes themselves, meaning that he beautified his ornaments rather than vice versa, yet he had chosen to adorn it with the same. He graciously showed his wish-yielding lotus feet to devotees that worshipped him through thoughtless processes for the gratification of their own desire, lotus feet whose petals in the shape of toes could be distinctly seen through the rays of their moon-like nails. Nay, he greeted his worshippers with his countenance, which was endowed with a beautiful nose and graceful eyebrows, and lit up with a smile that was enough to relieve the agony of the whole world, and which was graced with brilliant earrings and reflected the ruddy luster of his lips that resembled a ripe bimba fruit. His buttocks were adorned with a loincloth yellow as the filaments of a kadamba flower, as well as with a girdle, while his bosom, dear son, was marked with a golden streak, the Srivatsa mark, which is an embodiment of Lakshmi, and graced with its favorite necklace, which was invaluable. In the shape of the 14 worlds, he is like a sandal tree, the king of trees, with his pair of stout arms, adorned with most precious armlets and the best of gems, for its numberless boughs, with its root unknown, because it has no root other than itself, and with the hoods of Shesha coiled about its trunk. The Lord further looked like a mountain surrounded by water. Even as a mountain affords shelter to both animate and inanimate beings, the Lord is the resting place of the whole animate and inanimate creation. Even as a mountain is friendly to large serpents, the Lord is a friend of Shesha. The thousands of diadems that adorned the hoods of Shesha appeared like so many peaks of gold, while the diamond called Kaustubha that shone on the bosom of the Lord looked like a gem emerging from the heart of a mountain. Brahma now had a clear view of Srihari, who wore round his neck a wreath of sylvan flowers that represented his glory and was graced by the Vedas that had taken the form of bees to hymn his praises. He was inaccessible even to the sun, the moon, the air, and fire, and could hardly be approached, being closely guarded by his weapons, who were truth, consciousness, and bliss personified. Truth, consciousness, and bliss being Satchidanandam, the three primal attributes of Brahman, and ever paraded around him. That very moment, Brahma, the would-be creator of the world, who was intent on evolving the universe, beheld the lotus which had shot forth from his navel, the water, the blast that was blowing, the sky. There's been a couple references here, the blast that was blowing and the waves agitated by the winds, that in the quality of destruction that destroyed the universe, this primal sea, while sleeping, is not calm. It's still tossed by the winds and waves of the destruction of Pralaya. The sky that hung over his head like a canopy, as well as himself seated on the lotus, and nothing other than these. Dominated as he was by the quality of rajas, he desired to undertake the work of evolving the creation, which is a very rajasic impulse. But when he saw only the aforesaid material for the same, he has nothing to work with but wind and water, he fixed his mind on the Lord, whose ways are unknown to anyone, and thus began to extol him who is the only one deserving of praise, intent as he was on creation. Thus ends the 8th discourse in Book 3 of the great and glorious Bhagavata Purana, otherwise known as the Paramahansa Sanghita. Well, most of us have been going for a while. I know that Radha and I think Santosha joined late because of the time change.
It's okay. It's all right. We can stop. Then
Okay.
I can.
Okay.
Don't worry.
All right.
We are very grateful that actually it's not my fault. It's someone else's fault.
I mean, like I said, I had no idea. I just was lucky to go by a clock that changes automatically.
That's okay. I usually am good at these things, but I don't know. It had to happen. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, you can turn off the recording so we can.
Yeah, I'll upload the recording so you guys can catch up on it.
No, you can turn off the recording so we can.
Oh, yeah, sure.